Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
Well, we'll call this informational meeting for Tuesday, July 9th to order. Thanks everybody for being here and those who are watching. And we'll get things started with City Council open discussion. Does anybody have anything today? Councilor Staley.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 2 points of discussion. The first is I wanted to say what a lovely experience that 4th of July picnic was. I was able to volunteer. I know last year several council members came as well. This is just a snapshot of some of the people who were there. This is Jim Carlson, and he had his family there. They're here for a little reunion. They attended the event, the parade, and the picnic. They loved it, and the music, by the way. This was a gal who's been in charge of helping with the food for like the last 14 years. And then behind you see all the setup. Yeah, they had different food lines set up this year. They used those orange cones to get people in lines, and they gave away pork sandwiches and chips. 5,000 people were planned for, and then people were just lounging around in the grass, listening to the community band. So again, just a lovely experience. So thanks be for that. And the second thing I wanted to share, on the positive note, is Councilor Brecky and I just had a meeting with Diane DeCoyer and Jeff Eckhoff to talk about the Neighborhood Summit. And we're bringing that back. Diane's sitting right out there. And we brainstormed. We had lots of ideas, but she also had the past ones. This was done during Mayor Huther's administration. He really put a lot of energy into forming associations within our community. And right now we think there's around 12 to 15 formalized associations. But we also have another opportunity for neighborhood community, and it's the Neighborhood Watch program. So we are going to be planning to do that, and I have good news for the council. We had a discussion last week concerning the budget and putting that into the budget. If you remember, do you my colleagues remember that conversation?
We do.
Okay. You remember it, Councilor Sale?
Yes.
Thank you. And anyway, we were going to put some money towards that, and today they said that the mayor's office has found the money to fund the whole thing. So we can take that out of our budget, which is good news. And so we're planning on putting that together either the first weekend of October or the last weekend on a Saturday. And the tentative plan is to have this held at the Ministerial Association School for the Deaf campus. So we're going to go over and look at that and see if that would facilitate the number of people we need to have at this, and I think it's very exciting. So just wanted to put that out to people's radar to be looking forward to that. And also, before that, in August, the first week of August, we have the Neighborhood Night Out program. So if you're part of a Neighborhood Watch or an association, be planning for your picnic on that Tuesday as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move into the presentations. We'll start with a Park and Rec update with Director Carney. Or somebody else. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Tori Miedema, City of Sioux Falls Parks and Recreation Department. Thank you for having us here today. We're here today to give you an update on the Parks and Recreation Comprehensive Plan that we started towards the beginning of this year. A big part of that presentation will be the community input that we've received, as well as the results of the statistically valid survey that we implemented as part of the plan. And then following that, we'll give you the steps forward as far as where we're going with the plan and when we hope to have it done. Today, our consultants are in town from Indianapolis. We have Pros Consulting. Leon Younger will be the primary presenter, as well as Jason Murado with ETC. So I'll ask them to come up and be available for any questions you have afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Leon Younger with Pros Consulting, president of Pros Consulting. I just want to introduce our team real quick here. John Jacobson here from Sioux Falls, John, with Confluence. Will Younger and Phil Perrin with Pros Consulting. Kevin Post is here with Councilman Hunsinger out of St. Louis. And who, did I miss anybody else? Okay. So just so we're all here, and we just want you to know that we're all working on your behalf, and we thank you for the opportunity. Today, we just want to walk through a little bit just about the survey, but kind of bring you up to date where we are in our process. So we started in community engagement. Most of you were either interviewed by phone or in person, and you gave us your feedback. We also, in that process, started a community survey, which we're going to share today, and Jason will walk you through that. So our process, we've done a full site and facility assessment. We've looked at all the programs and services. We've assessed your level of service, and we're in the process of looking at GIS mapping of the whole city in terms of parks and amenities. We've developed a website. We've looked at your community needs assessment through different lenses in terms of both qualitative and quantitative information, demographic assessment and trends analysis for here. We've benchmarked your community against 5 other communities of similar size. And we're now in the process of getting ready to start looking at the vision and developing a action plan for the organization, as well as an aquatics plan, and an updated capital improvement plan, and maintenance and operations, and an overall funding strategy so that everything that's over in the right in terms of how do we get there is our next piece of our work. So I'm going to turn this over to Jason, and he'll kind of take you through this, but just want to give you an update. We talked with 80 different participant groups that represented these folks on the screen. We had 14 community and staff focus groups, 16 stakeholder interviews, and 3 community forums. So we did the online survey, as well as we did a statistically valid survey where we had 493 households that were involved. And included in that, we also developed the website, which we had visitors to the website, 3,900 people on this plan, and unique views actually got into the technical reports that are on the system, 3,428 through July 9th of 2019. So we're getting as much input as we go along, but we're also being able to get information back from people, and they can read, so there's no surprises at the end. They're following along with us as we move forward. Okay, now here's Jason.
Thanks. My name is Jason Murado. I'm with ETC Institute. And just a little bit about ETC. We're a marketing research firm based in Olathe, Kansas, which is in the Kansas City area. And the thing that we specialize in is doing community surveys for local governments all across the country. And we've been doing this type of work for over 30 years. In the last 10 years alone, we've conducted surveys in more than 900 communities in 49 states. And we've done a lot of work here in the Sioux Falls area. In fact, in a few weeks, we're going to administer a long-range transportation planning survey for the Sioux Falls MPO. This will be the 5th time we've done that survey. We've done it every 5 years since 1999. And then we've also done a lot of work for the South Dakota Department of Transportation. And we've been working with them for about 15 to 20 years. And during that time, we've surveyed thousands of residents all across the state. And we've also done focus groups here in Sioux Falls. So we're definitely familiar with the area. Now, as far as this survey, the purpose of this is to get statistically valid data to help us determine the parks and recreation needs for the community. So this survey is administered by a combination of mail, online, and phone to randomly selected residents all throughout the city. And that's really our standard methodology for these types of surveys. Now, our goal is to get at least 400 completed surveys, and our typical response rate for these types of surveys is about 12 to 15%. So we mailed surveys to 3,000 randomly selected households in order to get at least 400 completed surveys. And we had a really, really good response. We actually ended up with 493 completed surveys, so almost 100 more than our minimum goal. And the results of these 493 surveys at the 95% level of confidence has a margin of error plus or minus 4.5%. So essentially that means if we did this survey the same way 100 times, 95 times the results would be plus or minus 4.4% from what we're reporting. So the results aren't perfect, but really it's a very, very small margin of error. And one thing we always do when we administer these surveys is as we're collecting the data, we check the demographics to make sure it reflects the actual population of the city. And we had a really good representation, both demographically and geographically. We'll look at some demographic comparisons in just a little bit. But geographically, if you look to the right, there we have a map of the city. The red dots are households that completed a survey. So we had a really good distribution throughout the city. The areas without dots are really non-residential areas. And if you notice the black lines are the boundaries of the council districts, we had at least 90 completed surveys in each council district, and you can see there the percent of respondents who came from each district. So we had a really, really good representation geographically. And then the survey is designed to gather input from both users and non-users of the Parks and Recreation system. So just a few demographic slides. This slide shows the ages of people in households who completed a survey, as well as the results according to the U.S. Census. So the blue line are the results for the survey, the yellow is the U.S. Census. And for all of these demographics, we want the difference between the survey and the U.S. Census to be less than 5%, because that way it's within the margin of error. So you can see here we had a really good representation by all different age groups. And this tells us that we surveyed a lot of different types of households, everything from households with young children to households with teenagers to households with seniors. So we also had 50% of survey respondents were male, 50% female, matches up with the U.S. Census, which is what we want. And then here's the breakdown by race, ethnicity. Again, we're pretty much right on target with the U.S. Census. So now we'll get into the actual survey results. This was the very first question on the survey, and here we asked households if any members of their household have used the Sioux Falls Parks and Recreation Department parks and facilities. And you can see here, 95% of households have used parks or facilities, which is a really, really high number. We asked this question on most of our surveys all over the country, and the national average is only about 80%. And that national average is based on surveys that ETC has conducted. So much higher usage than most other communities. Now the follow-up question to that, for those households who have used parks or facilities, we asked them to rate the quality. And you can see here, 96% of respondents rated the quality of the parks and facilities as either excellent or good. And the thing that really stands out here is that 42% of respondents rated parks as excellent. And if you look to the right, the national average is only 31%. So much, much higher ratings here. Then we also asked households if they participated in recreation programs. And you can see 43% of households have participated in programs, which is about 10% above the national average. So a really high usage for parks as well as programs. And then the follow-up question to that is how would you rate the quality of these programs? And you can see 92% gave a rating of excellent or good. The national average is 89%, so a little bit above average. And then one other thing that stands out here is that nobody gave a rating of poor, not a single respondent that we surveyed. So we also asked households which organization they've used for recreation activities. The number one source is the Parks and Recreation Department. Other sources used the most for recreation activities include churches, state recreation areas, and school districts. And those are pretty often some of the most frequently used organizations wherever we do the survey. And then we asked a marketing question. We asked households, how do they learn? What are their most preferred ways to learn about programs and services? And they could pick up to 3 items from this list. So you can see here, by far the top 3 ways they prefer to learn about programs and services are through the website, program guide, and then through Facebook. And those are pretty commonly the top ways that people prefer to learn about facilities and programs. So for this question, we asked what percentage of the cost for these programs residents prefer to be covered by taxes versus user fees. So if you look at the dark blue line, Those are residents who prefer 100% paid through taxes, and then it goes all the way to the gold bar, which is 0% taxes and completely through user fees. So for most of these areas, really people prefer some combination of taxes and user fees. Now these next few charts are all really kind of tied together. We have a question on the survey where we ask residents, which parks and facilities does their household have a need for? And they can just pick yes or no to each one of these facilities. So you can see there's 7 different facilities that over 50% of households have a need for, and for 4 of those, over 60% of households have a need. And that's an unusually high number. Usually when you ask this question, there's usually only a handful that more than 50% of households have a need for. And you can see those areas with the highest level of need are generally parks and trails, small neighborhood parks, walking and biking trails, paved biking trails, large community parks. I'm going to skip this slide and come back to it in a minute. So the follow-up question about whether or not your household has a need is how well your needs being met. And you can say anywhere from 100% our needs are completely met to 0% not met at all. Well, we take that information and determine the estimated number of households whose needs for facilities are being 50% met or less. So you can see here the types of parks and facilities with the highest levels of unmet need are walking and hiking trails, natural areas and wildlife, indoor playgrounds, indoor running and walking tracks, and then indoor fitness. And then the follow-up question to that is, which 4 of these parks and facilities are the most important to your household? And you can see here there's really 3 types of parks and facilities that stand out as being the most important. So this is small neighborhood parks, paved biking trails, and then walking and hiking trails. And then this is what we call the priority investment rating. And this analysis is based on two different types of data, which is the last 2 charts we looked at. First, we determine the level of unmet need for parks and facilities, and then we determine which parks and facilities are the most important to the households. So the idea behind this is that those areas that have a combination of a high level of unmet need, but also ones rated as the most important should be the highest priorities. So based on that, the areas that we rated as the highest priorities to focus on are walking and hiking trails, small neighborhood parks, natural areas and wildlife habitats, and then paved biking trails. And then there's several other areas in the red that are also rated as high priorities. So then we go through the same process for programs. So first of all, which programs does your household have a need for? You can see the programs with the highest level of need are adult fitness and wellness, outdoor adventure. So that includes things like camping, backpacking, and then nature programs. And those are commonly some of the programs with the highest level of needs nationwide. And then for the follow-up question, we try to determine how well needs are being met. And we use that to determine the total level of unmet need for programs. So the programs with the highest levels of unmet need are outdoor adventure programs, adult fitness and wellness, and then nature programs. And then again, the follow-up question to that is which of these programs are the most important to your households? And you can see listed there, the most important ones are adult fitness and wellness, outdoor adventure, youth learn to swim programs, and then nature programs. And then again here we have the priority investment rating. So this factors in both the level of unmet need and the level of importance. So based on that, the top priorities for programs are adult fitness and wellness programs, outdoor adventure, nature programs, canoeing and kayaking, and then travel and tourism programs. So for this question, here we're trying to determine the level of support for different actions that the Parks and Recreation Department could take to improve the Parks and Recreation system. So for this chart, you can see the blue bars are residents who are very supportive of each action being taken. The orange is somewhat supportive. The gray is not sure, and then the yellow is not supportive. So really there's 5 areas that kind of stand out here. For those top 5 rows, for each of those, over 50% of households gave a rating of very supportive, and then over 75% are either very or somewhat supportive. So you can see that's really mainly related to parks and trails, improving existing neighborhood parks, improving existing walking and biking trails, improving existing large parks, improving existing nature preserves, and then developing new trails that connect to existing trails. Now then, for the follow-up question to that, from this same list of different actions that could be taken, we ask which three are the most important. And you can see now there's really three that kind of stand out. Improving existing small neighborhood parks, improving existing paved walking and biking trails, and then developing new trails that connect to existing trails. And these results really reflect what we saw in that priority investment rating for parks and facilities. Then we also asked about level of support for funding those types of actions that households rated as the most important in the previous slide. So you can see that the types of fundings that residents are the most supportive of are grants, corporate sponsorships, enterprise operations, existing sales tax, and then program user fees. And then here we ask residents how satisfied they are with various aspects of current services that are provided by the Parks and Recreation Department. So again, here you can see that the blue is very satisfied, the orange is somewhat satisfied. The gray is neutral, and here we interpret neutral as kind of average or meeting expectations. This was a rating of a 3 on a 5-point scale. And then the yellow are those who are, of course, dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. So what's encouraging here is the highest rated areas are also the ones that households rated as the most important. So maintenance of parks, number of walking and biking trails, the amount of open space. For each one of those, you have more than 70% of households who are either very or somewhat satisfied, and significantly less than 10% who are dissatisfied. And then here we're just asking about satisfaction with the overall value that households receive from the Parks and Recreation Department. And you can see 84% of households gave a rating of very satisfied or somewhat satisfied. Only about 3% are dissatisfied. And these ratings are significantly higher than the national average. And then we just have one more demographic slide. We asked residents how long they've lived in the city. And you can see we had a good mix of longtime residents. About a third have lived in the city for more than 30 years. But then we also had 26% who have lived in the city for 10 years or less. So that's everything I had for the survey. I'll pass it back to Leon.
Any questions for Jason?
Okay, that's it for the presentation.
I just have what our next steps are.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. The next steps, and we're wrapping up. We met with the program staff today on the assessment, their assessment. We're doing a financial analysis of the system, and looking at all of the ways that you deliver services in terms of parks, amenities, and programs in terms of what we call a level of service standards. And then we're doing finishing up the equity mapping of fairness across the system. And also we're working with to finish up and update the aquatics master plan for the city. And we'll do a capital improvement plan that'll come forward, and we'll be doing this all in the next couple months. And we'll develop the strategic action and implement plan, and then a final plan in November. So that's kind of where we are in our process.
All right.
Anything else?
That it?
That's it. Any
Okay.
questions?
Counselors, any questions? Counselor Kiley.
Thank you. Your return rate was 16.4% on your surveys. How does that compare nationally?
That's better than average. The typical average for our surveys is about 12 to 15%. So that's why we mailed out 3,000 surveys, anticipating we would get about 400 completed surveys. So we did significantly better than that.
And then my other question, under the top parks and facilities priorities, I noticed that natural areas and wildlife habitats were pretty high in the high priority area, but yet action respondents are most willing to support improve existing nature preserves was only about 16% support in terms of willing to support that. Is that out of the ordinary, or do you often see that?
So you're comparing this chart then to this other one towards the end here. Is that-
Yes.
Yeah, when you look at this chart, I mean, there is high support for nature preserves, but then here we're asking people to select just their top 3. So then it just doesn't rank quite as high. I mean, that's pretty typical. Here it ranks just 5th out of, but it's still 5th out of, 16 or 17 options. So that's not too unusual.
And do you then look for anomalies such as that? I mean, it ranks high, but yet in terms of willingness to support, it's low. Do you look for that? Take that into consideration with final recommendations?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we definitely factor in both this chart as well as the other ones we looked at. So we'll take all of that into consideration.
Okay, thank you.
The thing about that, sir, is we also look at the crosstabs. So we'll go back and look across the system, which helps us to really customize the park system based on where needs are greater in certain areas of the community, and through the crosstabs by age, by race, by wealth, and location. Okay?
Thank you.
Counselor Staley?
I just have a housekeeping item that this probably goes more towards the department heads, but it's really helpful if you can put numbers, page numbers on these slides when it comes to going back and referencing them. This afternoon, we received a copy of the whole master plan. It's like 100 pages, I believe.
Survey?
Yes, or all this you've consolidated the information here.
Survey. That what you received was the full survey, and this is just a highlight of that.
Exactly, that's right. So I looked at that this afternoon, so I didn't realize what we were going to be getting here. But one of the pages on that survey, or on the information we got this afternoon, it had, and I can't quote it exactly because I don't have it in front of me, but you must have asked the question as to what they could do to improve, or how there was something about their awareness of the programs. Do you remember what the entitlement of that was?
The question was about how they could.
And if you want to step to
Come
the microphone, please.
Thank you.
Was what are the ways we can improve getting information out to users about what programs and services are being provided?
I read that, and I thought it was interesting because at the very top, and it's not highlighted here, of course, to reference, but it said people were not aware of the programs. And I'm just going to give one example of something I have been rooting for, and the awareness element is the Frank Olson pool. There's no signage to tell people there's a pool off 18th, and you have to turn down Grandview to get to it, a side street. And so new people coming to the area probably aren't even aware there is a pool there. So that's why I'd be very cautious about using numbers of attendees to say, well, this pool can stay open and this pool can't, because the visibility of that is limited. Okay, so that's one thing. And also, I think you talked about equity and services. You mentioned something about surveying that. And again, coming back to the pools, I've been aware of what's going on at Frank Olson versus what's happening at Laurel Oaks or Drake Springs. There aren't as many activities scheduled there. And all of those things are going to, of course, pull people in to be a participant in that particular structure. So a question for you is, when you're talking at the very end here about the next action that we're taking, the aquatics master plan. So what's that going to entail?
I'm Kevin Post with Councilman Hunsaker. So I completed the master plan back in 2013, and as part of this, we do recommend kind of every 5 years to do an update. So we'll be updating the recommendations from that. And that includes revisiting demographics. I visited all the pools today and met with all the managers to understand how they're used, because each one is unique, offers a different service to the local area. And so we'll be providing an updated recommendation based on the current situation as opposed to where things were in 2013.
And back to specifically Frank Olson in 2013, I think, wasn't that slated to become a spray park?
Yeah, at the time, the phase 2 recommendation was to consolidate the 2 pools in that area, which I believe is Keene and Frank Olson are in the same service area. I don't have my map in front of me, but there was 2 pools in the same service area. As we looked at a service area map, and the idea was to expand one of them and then consolidate the other to a spray ground. And the idea was to operate the system more efficiently. That was the direction given at the time. One of the things we'll be looking for is there new direction in terms of level of service and goals in terms of capital budget, but also operational budget, because that drives a lot of those decisions.
So where would you get that direction from?
Usually this group or, steering committee staff through this process as we start to uncover information.
And again, like I said before, this particular pool, which serves the northeast area, I don't know what other pools you're trying to consolidate. Maybe it was Laurel Oaks, but I mean, back when Drake Springs was up for becoming an indoor pool, I lived near there, and we were told, and you've been to Drake Springs, and I was told by the people wanting to make that indoor, when I raised concerns about those children, many from impoverished areas, where they were going to swim outdoors. And I was told they could ride their bikes from that Drake Springs area over to Terrace Park. Do you know how many major intersections they would have to cross to get their bikes over there? 2.5 miles? Or they could ride their bikes over to Frank Olson. And to me, that was such an insensitive, elitist attitude about these little children that I did a petition drive. And we wanted a traditional pool there. The city went ahead and built what they did with a pool that you can't even teach swimming lessons in. But case in point, it's one of the most utilized pools in our town. It's in a great area. So Frank Olson needs a little bells and whistles added to it, but the people in that area want to keep a swimming pool. So, and also, I thought it was interesting, and again, I couldn't reference what you put out there today, the 100-page report with this, but I see that when you're talking about outdoor pools in general, there's several times that it's referenced here where you're asking them a question, if you would want to like renovate an existing outdoor pool, that ranks higher than creating new outdoor pools, building new outdoor pools. So that's another interesting thing, because I know there's some other areas in town where they want another outdoor pool. And of course, then I don't think you're talking about subsidies at all here on the outdoor pools. And that would be another element, because my understanding is we're subsidizing the indoor pool at a cost of about $600,000 a year. It was going to be $500,000. It's ended up being a $600,000 subsidy, and it costs more to go to that pool than it does to those outdoor pools. So knowing that in our community we have a history of supporting those things, we never expect them to be, freestanding, self-supporting entities. So that's what we've done in our community. I think those things are important. So that's my 2 cents.
And just one follow-up in terms of where we'll get some additional direction. So one of our goals is not to tell you what to do, but really provide you information so you can make the knowledgeable decision. So we'll come back with different scenarios with the capital costs, operational costs, and just like we did during the first plan, we had multiple different options and varieties, and we'll look for direction. So we could say every neighborhood gets a mega aquatic complex and it's just $100 million. Well, we don't necessarily have those funds. So we'll kind of start with bookending it and kind of getting into what's reasonable, both from a level of service, but also a sustainability and funding.
Well, another issue that came up excuse me, I'll wait, somebody else has.
Let's go to Councilor Sale, we'll come back around. Thank you, Councilor Sauberg. Just have 2 quick observations. First off, it looks really good, and kudos to our Parks Department for a job well done. Maintenance and things of the parks are always very highly rated, and I appreciate that. And secondly, just somewhat disappointed that curling was not rated as #1 need in Sioux Falls, because that's where I would believe. So kudos to our Parks Department.
Anybody else before we go back to, yes, Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. I don't think curling even made the question on there, I don't think. Maybe it did, I must have missed that. I've a question on the level of support for potential actions. It's towards the back, Q13 is what it is. I'm curious if you could expand a little bit on that other. 85% is a substantial amount of being very supportive. What's other?
Yeah, so the other, we probably shouldn't include it on this chart because a very small percentage of residents even select other, and then they could write in their answer. So it's just a variety of different things. So really that's 85% of a very small number. And they are listed in the full report, but it's just a variety of different things.
Okay, I'll refer to that. It just caught my attention of being so high, but of the 85%, you could have one person that said curling or
That's where curling would show up, right?
Sorry, had to. It's just too easy. You made it too easy, Counselor. My other question I had, well, one comment is that clearly there's a desire in this community to maintain our amazing bike trail system and our hiking. It's a jewel of this city that we've really made it a priority to connect and have connectivity. West Side was recently connected, and I know that's heavily utilized. And so kudos to the Parks Department to continue to maintain already what is being used so much when we have visitors and our current citizens that live here. The area that drew attention to me, and I don't know if I have a question as so much of an interest in the tax versus user fee support. I think that will be a really delicate dance, if you will, as far as how we fund the park system. You know, currently it's being proposed that we spend a lot more money on our road system that needs it so badly. But there is a desire to have better and bigger parks and more of those quality of life amenities. And how we fund that will be, I think, a delicate area as we wade through that, because I don't know that everyone's chomping at the bit to have increased user fees to fund some of these items that others may want. So it will be interesting to see how that comes forward as the survey is continued to look at that area. So thank you for your work in this.
One thing about that, you know, right, and I think you said it, that the community has been very supportive of the Parks and Recreation Department. One thing we always look at is cost recovery level for the whole department. Currently it's 17%, and nationally it's about 33%. So it's about half, but that's because that's the way you wanted to fund the system. And we recognize that there's a delicate reason we ask the question is just what is that tolerance?
Right.
And so we have a better understanding about, you know, in all public services that are provided, there's always a public good and then there's a private good. And sometimes how strong is the private good versus the public good and what gets delivered. And so part of our work with the Recreation Division and the Recreation Program Assessment is to evaluate what are those costs in relationship to experience.
Right.
Okay.
And I appreciate that. And, you know, some of the areas that I hear, having small children myself and being also involved in some of the adult athletic programs, it's a policy decision within each department how those are utilized. And I'm not criticizing anyone right now, but as we move forward, is it something that we can utilize the park system even? I mean, we have this beautiful green area, but you have to schedule it. So does that make sense, or can it be a more of a free-for-all, but we don't want the wear and tear, but what's the good of having it if we're not going to use it? Green's pretty, but if we're not using it and everyone pays for it, it's really hard to support more user fees for that when oftentimes a lot of our parks are empty because they're so pretty.
All communities, they struggle with that.
Right.
Just because it's free doesn't mean that people use it either.
Right.
You know, there's a value associated with one, do I get a permit and I'm able to actually have something for my exclusive use or my group's use, and what's that value? And so when we look at this, we're always looking at what the survey said, what people said, and really what are the balances, requirements of the system in relationship to fund itself. And that's one of the things we're working with the staff coming up is how the system funds itself for the future.
I have two more questions I can yield if there's others.
Anybody else? Councilor Brecky?
But actually, go ahead, because mine's for Don, so I'll let them finish with these guys first, and then I'll ask a question of Don.
I'll do a couple then.
Why don't you finish then if that's
I'll be fast. Okay. I'm curious, two areas of other interest are the winter versus summer utilization. Obviously, we have amazing summers, tough winters, and utilizing the park systems in those multiple ways. So I'm interested to see what those suggestions and recommendations that come out. The other question that I have is when we talk about special events in our park system, are you looking at the security costs that go with it? Because that's not recouped. When you talk about a 17% nationally, it's 33, 34%. When you have security at said event, I don't even want to use one as an example, but whether it's a race or a concert or whatever it is, there's a lot that the city invests their own dollars in for the good of the public, keeping everybody safe. I understand the need, but I'm curious if that security component of those special events is included in any of this master planning.
Not necessarily in what we've looked at in the financials so far, but one of the things that we're encouraging the department to do is do a full cost of service so that you do know what it costs on a per person basis, a per acre, a per field, a per visitor, just so you always know.
Right.
And by knowing that, in both direct and indirect costs, you make decisions, you know, is that the investment we want to make? And at this point, those costs we don't have really tight, but one of the things we're talking to staff about that tomorrow.
Thank you.
Councilor Starr, did you have questions for this gentleman?
If you don't mind. One of the questions that I had is when, kind of almost a little follow-up on what Councilor Erickson was saying, when you talk about grants and corporate sponsorships and those type of things, is that strictly, do you look more at by event or just in general that someone would sponsor a park or that kind of thing? What do you see?
Well, it varies.
Communities?
You know, typically if it's an event, you have kind of a title sponsor and a presenting sponsor, an associate sponsor, or a stage sponsor. You get various sponsors by type of event. What we're really looking at here is a combination of really what are public opportunities and not-for-profits and private, and where would they fit with the system where there might be the investment. Yesterday I was downtown and we were having dinner, and one of the things I was really amazed is all of the corporate sponsorships for the various kinds of art pieces that are on the street. You don't see that very often in a community this size, and it was really refreshing to see it, which really indicated to me that this is a pretty giving town. And so when you do that, you really want to look at, you want to match what the opportunity is with, you know, corporately, who really wants to invest in that. And we really see that you have some opportunities that would make sense. And certainly I know the Arboretum is focused a lot on that as well. And that's another area we're working with on this plan, is just basically how to help them become as sustainable as possible.
Super. And I have one just demographics question about the questions that were asked as we look at equity and through different things. Did you consider asking about voter registration as part of the plan?
Whether or not they're a registered voter? We ask that on some surveys, but not often. I'd say maybe only 5 to 10% of the time. So it's not a commonly asked question.
Would there be a benefit to doing that?
I mean, not typically. I mean, you could compare the results for voters versus non-registered voters, of course, do a crosstab for that. I guess that would be the one benefit. But it's not a question we ask too often.
Thank you.
Councilor Brecky?
Comment about that. When there's a funding issue associated with like a feasibility study or something that requires a major public investment, we typically will ask, you know, are you a registered voter? Because that way we have an understanding. If you voted, where would you stand on that issue? Okay.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Brecky.
If you could put that one back up, I think it's the third one. If not, oh, all the way back. I can't miss the opportunity to get on my soapbox a little bit about the benefits of master planning and long-range planning. And I look at a slide like this, you know, where are we today, where are we going tomorrow, and how do we get there? And I think how marvelous it would be for the city if the city council and the mayor's office could work together and develop such a plan for the city of Sioux Falls, which is really leading me to the question, this is a huge and very thorough plan. It's a big undertaking, but it really demonstrates the magnificent results and the minutia that you can get into that assists you in your decision-making and your leadership when you embark upon a process like this. And, you know, and the question is, you know, what did it cost? And I'm not doing that in a derogatory fashion to put you on the spot, because you don't, this doesn't come cheap, but I'm looking at that because I think it's important, you know, for us as a council to start thinking about these things and what it might cost, you know, on that level. And I've asked that to you before, but I forgot what the answer was, so.
I think I know.
All of that, and you got off the hook for the question.
I think I know, but I don't want to guess.
Yes.
Make sure.
In round figures, it's about $200,000 plan.
Okay. Thank you. Money well spent.
Okay. Counselor Staley?
So, question, do you ever make recommendations? I'm coming back to the pool situation, but do you ever make recommendations, having been all over the country looking at these things, as to what a department could do to make their pools more attractive? Absolutely. And like programming for, and maybe low-cost solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, depending on the age and the usage, and there's immediate action items versus long-term action items. So some of the immediate things would be simple things like adding shade, enhancing programming, little things that people can notice, and some comfort items that are low cost, and those will be part of it as immediate action items. And then as we look at the life expectancy of the facility, there'll be some sort of long-term recommendation with that.
So you've seen a lot of pools.
Yes.
When I was a lifeguard. I put myself through college as a swimming instructor, lifeguard. We always had music at the pool. At the Midco, we have music. On the 4th of July, they had music. Do you find that pools across the country have music playing?
Yes, in fact, there's this company specifically dedicated to providing pool for outdoor, or music for outdoor pools that is geared towards, you can make it family oriented and put your own ads into it and everything. So it's become a big trend. Yeah.
Big trend, super. And then one more thing is, I know that this has come up in the past, the need, and you have it listed on one of those charts as a high priority, those neighborhood parks, but having basketball availability, places for kids could play basketball, where kids could, it used to be we'd have some of these smaller baseball venues, versus what we've tended to do here is to have these big complexes and kind of push them out on the outer perimeter. Do you see a trend towards that, of making it more interesting for kids to gather in a neighborhood park and have something to do?
Are you talking specific to the pool or?
No, I'm past the pool now. I mean,
Okay, well, I'll go back
but
to
yeah,
that.
we're coming over to
I
just.
think what shows up on your survey here, that neighborhood parks are of primary importance, and that is very strong, that people would like to see more activity, more amenities, more experiences that can come out of a neighborhood park. And that, for us, I mean, your community parks and your signature parks and your sports complexes are really well defined. And it's in the neighborhood parks that show up really strong in the survey that people would really like more opportunities. And part of that work is to evaluate how those experiences are actually created. Sometimes, and what's hard about a neighborhood park is typically you don't have restrooms in a neighborhood park. You don't have parking. People walk to it. So how many experiences can you give them? And most neighborhood parks are built around a 1-hour experience, okay? When it gets into the 2- and 3-hour experiences, that's when we need restrooms, we need parking, we need lighting, all the other things. And so we're always balancing off an appreciation for how those parks get developed in relationship to what the community is expecting. But sport courts are usually a part of a neighborhood park experience.
Well, and in my mind, I tend to think of playground equipment. Yeah. That's really what we put in our neighborhood parks. Versus how often do they put a place to play basketball hoops?
I would say, most neighborhoods have some kind of a sports court. Most of them have some type. Now, you guys, you've set up your court system in 8 and 10 and 12 court complexes. At least the ones that I'm aware of are relatively new in terms of tennis courts and facilities like that, which are great. But again, philosophically, it's what the neighborhood supports, what they're looking for, how open is the school systems and the schools around it. If the school systems facilities are open, sometimes the park doesn't have to duplicate what the school district does. Mm-hmm. So we're always looking at that balance.
Well, and tennis, do you have a sense of how much our tennis courts are being used around town? I know we have the McKinnon Park one where we have tournaments, but just...
Tennis at one time had 31 million players. It dropped down to 11 million players, and now it's back up to 18 million players. So it's kind of gone through a cycle. And the other thing is, a lot of people who are in the 60s and 70s were really, when tennis was really popular in the 60s and 70s, now want to play pickleball. So consequently, you got to make adjustments in what people's interest is, so they keep them active.
And keep their joints from aching. those tennis players. And one more thing, back to the map of the people you surveyed at the very beginning there. Okay, I would just want to know what the cross streets are. I can't tell, because it sounded like we're almost getting into unannexed areas.
Yeah, I mean, the black lines are council districts. I don't know if we're here.
Right, but aren't there, well, okay, so we got Highway 11 there, and then up, what is that street on the east side there going over?
The east side,
On the very top of Highway 11 before it curves off? What is that street?
probably 6 Mile Road, I'd assume.
Heading to the west? 6 Mile Road doesn't go east and west.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to tell which one you're talking about, but, oh, Rice Street? Yeah. Oh, Rice Street, the diagonal one, going into 229.
So the northeast area, you kind of hit, well, so what is that? Is that 18th? Heading up the top of we're talking about districts there?
18.3%.
We got yeah, well, you got the northeast district, and then you got a little street going in the middle there, kind of on the south side of it. Is that 26th or 18th?
There's 26th, and then there's also 10th Street.
Where's 10th Street?
10th and 26th actually match up when it gets further east as you go.
Okay, because I'm just trying to determine how far north those dots seems kind of sporadic as you went farther north over there. That's Counselor Starr's, maybe Counselor Starr, do you know where that would be? Towards the top part, what area is that? Where's Washington High in there?
Basically, the random sampling was taken out of the 80,000 households that we have in Sioux Falls, randomly selected, and the percentages that you have are by district, just so you got a feel for how many respondents you had in your district.
Right, it just looks like you had more response in the central area of the southeast, maybe over on that north or the west side. So it's just a statement. It seems like people on the north end sometimes get left out of the discussion.
A lot of the gaps do happen where there's a lot of urban area and there's not households.
Right, that's why I wanted to know what exactly that street was, so we still don't really know. Right. Because I know up by Washington High, there's still a lot of people living there.
Yep.
Every district had at least 90 households that responded. We had one district that had like 120 households. So that's what when we were doing the survey, was a balance. Okay.
Anybody else?
Just to follow up with that, it's not that the districts that are maybe lower represented or higher represented, it's not that anyone had a greater opportunity to respond than the other. They all had their opportunities. It's a matter of whether they responded or not. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. You know, the survey was mailed to 3,000 households, and they were selected completely at random. And the distribution of those 3,000 households reflect the actual population of the city. So this is just, those who actually completed the survey.
Okay, anybody else? I had a quick question for you. Statistic-wise, you just threw one out. Being a tennis fan and a very marginal player, tell me this stat you just said again, that 31 million to 11 million to 18 million players. What's the time frame on that?
25 years.
Okay.
In the 70s, that's when tennis peaked.
Right.
And then it really had a slow kind of dive into the 90s and actually in late 90s. And then and they really kind of changed their game a little bit. They went to a smaller course for kids, and they kind of did what golf has been trying to do in terms of, developing a lot of programs for kids. And so they set up a lot more learning programs, and that's brought back more of the tennis players. And of course, it also depends on who's the national players that are out there.
Exactly.
And that really makes a big difference. It's not any different than the Olympics. When the Olympics are on and gymnastics, and we're doing well in gymnastics programs go up all over the place. And so it kind of follows that. So.
Yeah, I knew it dipped. I didn't know it dipped that much, and I didn't know it was coming back, so that's encouraging.
Well, I think it's really healthy. I think tennis has done a really good job in repositioning themselves. And having worked with a lot of organizations and cities in tennis, they're actually redeveloping a lot of their centers that they, for a long time, didn't think it was going to actually make it, and now they're reinvesting in them.
Terrific. Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody. Oh, Counselor Erickson.
I just wanted to follow up. I think what he's saying is that we need to build more soccer fields, and based on the World Cup that just took place.
Everybody's getting their interest in here. Okay, thanks, everybody. Appreciate that presentation. Next up, we will receive a code enforcement update from Development Service Manager, Mr. Tobias. Do you always clear a room like this, Matt?
Yeah, I do. I usually have that effect. I can clear a room real easy, so. Tonight, I just want to, first off, good evening, everybody. Matt Tobias, Development Service Manager, City of Sioux Falls. So I just wanted to, I take this time every single year. I think throughout the year, I have conversations with every single one of you about different things that are going on in your district. They're not always the most pleasant things. So I like to take this time to kind of highlight some of the good things that code enforcement actually puts out every single year, or that we actually have our hands involved with. Because we've really, if you probably have noticed, the whole term code enforcement, I mean, we still have a group that meets every 2 weeks, and we call ourselves the Code Enforcement Management Team. And it's a group that consists of police, fire, planning, housing, the attorney's office, and we all gather every 2 weeks, and we share things, right? So it's a time for us to say, hey, we have a problem, and PD is awesome at this. They'll say, hey, we're seeing increased activity in this neighborhood, and then oftentimes it's more of a shotgun approach that way, to where if we have, and we've done it, and we've done walkabouts with police before in neighborhoods where we have a lot of complaints. So it's a really good time for us to do that. So we still call ourselves the code enforcement team, but you will notice though that I was never a really big fan of the whole code enforcement title, right? Because you're right away you're shaking someone's hand. You're like, I'm code enforcement. So it's what we're trying to do is we're trying to almost rebrand ourselves. So you're seeing it to where in the past you'll hear me refer to it as neighborhood services, right? So it's really that's kind of our message really going forward is we're more neighborhood services. We're more neighborhood centric. So they're going to see a common theme in my little update today that's going to go back to a lot around neighborhoods. We have a lot of strength in our neighborhood associations right now. Diane DeCoyer is with us tonight. Diane was an urban planner and now has jumped in the neighborhood role, which I think is a really good thing. Diane is actually re-energizing some of those neighborhood associations, getting them to think outside the box a little bit. So there's one common theme you're going to see tonight. It's going to be neighborhoods. And that's really what we want to get our focus back onto. So I'd be remiss if I didn't just kind of read to you our Planning and Development Services mission statement, because it's a pretty good one. The Planning and Development Services Department is responsible for managing the orderly development of Sioux Falls and overseeing the protection of property, along with ensuring public safety and building construction and maintenance. That's kind of our go-to. And then I really like this quote. Code enforcement always brings more gratitude after a violation is corrected than it does when it was first reported. I get, even when I'll see something and I'll notice it and you see it get fixed on its own, something that's kind of like, it feels good when you see some of that stuff happening in your neighborhood. One of the things that we did roll out in early 2018 was an app that we call, not really an app, it's a portal. It's a portal that we call Customer Self-Service. We call it CSS. I want to highlight this really quick because if you go to www.css.siouxfalls.org, you go to that website, it'll ask you to register as a member, all right? And once you have an account with CSS, you can look at all code cases, right? So when I have someone calling and saying, what's going on with my neighbor's house, although we would really like them to go to CSS and they can see if there's been any kind of inspection that's taken place there, they can do that. We're still going to give them the answer, but it really it kind of allows for our citizens to get a better handle on what we have out there for code cases, to kind of keep track of things if they want to on their own. We're always going to take their phone calls. We're always going to answer their questions, but it's another way for us to do that. Also, on the side note of this, CSS is an application where you can actually apply for permits online. You can schedule inspections online and everything else. So we're seeing this be utilized quite a bit in our building services department. Rental registrations, rental housing. If you probably all remember, 2016, I was here in front of you. We went through the rental registration ordinance. One thing you'll hear out of Mayor Tenhaken, out of his administration, you'll hear probably a lot of us talk about these BHAGs, okay? Big, hairy, audacious goal. Big, huge goal. So rental registration, one of the struggles with that has been increasing overall participation in the rental registration. Okay, now you are all aware, there is an ordinance out there, and we do have an ordinance, and we do a lot of educating. The housing team, along with the city attorney's team, they have a BHAG that increases by 25%. They have ideas and ways in which we can actually create a website to where we can have all the people who are registered properties, the properties registered with the city. We'll create a website to where it's almost like advertising, right? We're gonna have all the properties that are registered with the city. It's an idea we have right now out there. We're trying to get as much participation as possible. We do stumble upon properties, a lot of properties throughout the day. I'll say that throughout the day, not the week. A lot of days where property maintenance team is going through and they'll find a property that's not registered as a rental. We send them a letter and we go from there. So it's a BHAG. Just to wrap our head around, we have a pretty good handle on it now, as far as I don't have the actual numbers for what we have as properties that are registered right now. That number changes so infrequently because we're building so many apartments. It's really hard to actually get a number of total units in our city, believe it or not. I mean, that number is really kind of hard to get your head around. So we threw out there a 25% increase, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that done through education and through creative ways where we can do that. You'll recognize this. This is our old trusty who to contact form. We do still use this. It's worked for us for a number of years. It's kind of a go-to for code enforcement. It's got a lot of our numbers and stuff like that on there. But we're really, in 2019, we really want to try to get to something like this. Okay, so this is really our goal. We really want to get something that's a little more neighborhood resource guide. We want to get something that's a little more visually appealing. I'll give you more descriptions. So we're always just trying to increase our messaging and whatnot. The associations, like I said a little bit before, Diane's with us tonight, but we have like 12 really solid, active neighborhood associations. We're always looking to obviously increase that, especially with crime watch areas too. So we have a really good, solid, active neighbor association group right now. One thing that we did, if you remember in 2019, this year, we actually were able to budget for some neighborhood grants. We had seen some decreases in those grant fundings in the previous years. This year, 2019, we said we need to refund that program a little bit. So we went ahead and allocated $50,000 to the neighborhood grant program. That's been quite a fun thing, just to be on the outside and keeping tabs on the different projects that are going to take place. So we're getting ready to award these projects. I'll just go through them. We have a sculpture replacement in Lyon Park. We have some solar radar speed signs. A lot of urban reforestation, and that's in response to Emerald Ash Borer. A lot of these boulevard trees, neighborhood identification signs, welcome kits for new neighbors, and some plantings of flowers and whatnot. So we are proposing the same for 2020. We have it right now in our budget as hopefully we'll get approved for some more funding for the neighborhood grant program next year. Another cool thing we do, we work very closely with Light and Power. If you don't know Jerry Jongling, you should get to know him. He's a great guy. He's a Light and Power superintendent. And Jerry is one that's always there to help. A lot of times we hear concerns in neighborhoods about lighting. And with bad lighting comes increased crime and comes everything else. So if Jerry's able, and if he has extra LED lights laying around, which he doesn't, if he's able to try to find some and plan for some, we do that. We met with USF, and we literally had to go in. We went to USF, and we have an association with Augustana. We have a neighbor association with Augustana. So we went to USF and said, "Are you interested?" And they said, "Yeah, what can you do for us?" We said, "What are your problems?" And they said traffic and lighting. Those were the two big things right away. So we were able to tackle the lighting thing. It was a really cold night in January. You got to do these light assessments at night, obviously. We found a lot of dark areas around the USF campus where they were hearing a lot of their concerns. So through that project, we went ahead and Light and Power installed 45 new LED street lights in that neighborhood. Jerry and his team drove down the streets and went, that's dark, and they just had a guy on the map, and they were going through and doing their thing. So we really kind of light those neighborhoods up, which do a lot at night. Also, in response to the USF neighborhood, that same night, they went down to St. Francis House, and we had concerns from St. Francis House, and they went ahead and they installed 5 new LED street lights in that St. Francis House area too. So if you hear concerns, we don't have a whole pile of LED lights out there to install, but if you hear concerns, share them with us, people in your district, because we can at least do a study and get it on the list for some areas that we can touch for the next time. Because really, we hear a lot when it comes to lighting in these neighborhoods. It's a big concern at night. Another thing, once again, like I said, neighborhood, you're going to hear it a lot, but there's a neighborhood coalition that was kind of started. Mayor Tenhaken kind of had an idea on the campaign trail, hearing a lot about neighborhoods. So there's a coalition of the core neighborhood associations in Sioux Falls. They're getting together, they're meeting, and some of the things that they're kind of addressing everything in the core. Some things that are important to them in the core: walkability, mature streets, access to downtown, historic preservation, really, really important to these core neighborhoods. So there's a coalition. The makeup of the coalition actually touches all of these. There's a representative for every single one of these neighbor associations on that. Diane's working very closely with these associations right now. So that's another thing that you'll see some work kind of being done in these neighborhoods. Then also you have another BHAG. Public Works, actually, I give them kudos for this, because Public Works came up with a BHAG about one Sioux Falls neighborhood and what we could do in these neighborhoods to actually, from a public works standpoint, what we could do to actually improve quality of life in these neighborhoods. So they got to talking about this, and then they said, and I found out kind of after they formed their BHAG, they had a core team, and I found out they were meeting, and they said, hey, I think we probably need to talk to you. And I said, oh, let's bring Diane in too. Let's bring Shelley from housing in as well. So now we're all kind of in this joining Public Works to work on their BHAG, and it's partnering with citizens to improve the quality of life in the neighborhoods. One of the things that we did here, our GIS department created these really nice heat maps. So you'll see on this map right here, these are all the code cases from 2015 to 2018. So when we can receive a complaint, we immediately create a code case, and it requires us to follow up from there. So you'll see the darker areas where we're getting more of our complaints. So it's really, and this is just one of the maps. I have a whole series of these maps that I just got from the group that was meeting on this, and it's crime maps, and so it really allows us to look closely at these maps and kind of see if we see a pattern, and if there's something that we can do in those neighborhoods. Another neighborhood cleanup just happened on June 22nd. This is one it's a really good partnership with these neighborhood associations and the Ellis and Eastern Railroad. Ellis and Eastern runs right through the core of our city. Councilor Staley, you can probably find her in that picture up there. She did participate in that cleanup event. It's been going on for a number of years. It's through Ellis and Eastern Railroad. This year we had Avera, we had Sioux Falls Up and Coming, then we had our 4 neighborhood associations, so 4 cores. So we had Downtown, All Saints, and Pettigrew Heights. And they got together on a Saturday, and they work with Ellis and Eastern, and they go through, and Ellis and Eastern had a lot of staff there this year, and they really kind of clean up that railroad area as it goes through our core. Here's one of the little fancy maps Diane sent me. Ace Hardware has always been a really big partner for us with that. Ace provides all the garbage sacks, and they provide all the gloves and whatnot. And this year, Josias was nice enough to bring coffee out to the group. So, Project Nice and Keep. This is another one we hang our hat on. A very good program that's been ran through the health department very successfully for, Luann, 30 years? 30 years. 2018 was another great year. 500 tons of rubble, 16 tons of tires, 5.5 tons of appliances, scrap metal, 53 tons. I've been to it. I've had the opportunity to go to a few larger kind of code enforcement conferences, call it that. And there's cities that are a lot bigger than us that would not even, they loathe the fact that we actually send out a free dump pass, let alone do something like this. You know, I can't believe you send out free dump passes. So this project it does a lot for code enforcement through our neighborhoods, does a lot for our neighborhoods in general, does a lot for our city. It's a very, very good project. So all those great successes, this year we had a small little flood that kind of put a damper on the project nice and keep this year. So, but coming soon, you'll see it. Save the date right now, we're looking at September 9th through the 13th. We're still finalizing some stuff going forward, but that's kind of what we're thinking right now. We feel it's our duty to do this and to do it right this year. So we were gonna do a more scaled back version, and we decided to kind of come back, and I think we're really gonna go back and do it the way we've always done it. We're gonna provide the good service that we've always done. So, parking strip ordinance. I came in front of this group a lot. We do see this a lot in our neighborhoods. Oftentimes when I do go to these neighborhood meetings, this comes up a lot with the parking strip ordinance. So that's still something that our office is promoting. National Night Out. This is coming up, and I think isn't there a council? I think the council's on Monday night, so councilors are free. So National Night Out is Tuesday, August 6th. That's our very own, the bottom left-hand corner is Brady Lewin. He is one of our community resource officers. I work very closely with Brady. He's excellent. Him and Kyle Johnson are my go-to PD anything in these neighborhoods. So Brady's there, and then that was a picture of last year. I mean, it's a really good opportunity for us to be present, for city staff to be present at these parties too, because it's a time for people to come out and get to know your neighbors a little better, and then just to pick our brains with questions. So it's actually a really good event. So Tuesday, August 6th at this one. And then we have to talk about building demolitions, notice to vacate and whatnot. We're all aware of the house on the left there. That one's still, we have a court hearing again in August. We'll go back to court. They did get a extension, but there's work being done at the property, that's all we wanted from day one. We just want to see the thing get done. It's not our intention to tear that thing down. We just would like to see something get done there. So we're starting to see some progress there. House on the right, unfortunate situation. We had a person who was incarcerated, and we had to vacate the home because it was such bad condition. So we're hoping that this person can at least come back and fix the home, but we're not so certain on that one. So we have to do that from time to time. We don't have anything on the docket right now saying that we're not going to be tearing down. We have a few that may come. This one particularly, the one on the right, could potentially, if the guy doesn't get his stuff together, we may actually adhere the property and then may probably end up tearing it down. We do happen to own both lots on either side of those houses. There were two dilapidated houses, which we intend to, through our urban renewal, our home funds, our neighborhood revitalization plan, we do plan to work with the contractors to build a nice affordable home in those three lots through our housing program. So we would like this gentleman to retain this house and come back, but we're not so sure on that situation there. So the other thing is we do also have an abandoned and substandard manufactured home project. You probably heard me talk about this in the past. We will go to auctions and try to buy some of these abandoned mobile homes for the taxes. We do that because we're finding that if we try to get in front of some of these not so good landlords and that buy these, and they'll just put people in them right away. And so if we can get there, we have a small line item in our budget to where if we can get there and buy some of these, we'll haul them to the landfill and have them scrapped. And then we hope that they'll put a new home there. So we've always done that program. The housing team, Shelley Unruh and her team, actually I'm going to say his name, Seth Peterson. He's one of Shelley's housing program specialists. Looked at this at this program that they have. They have a home it's called the Emergency Mobile Home Program. And they would go to these homes that were in really bad shape, and they were putting ACs, and it's always really tough when we as a city are trying to help them out, and we're giving them funds that we receive to put back into their home, trying to make it livable. So they came up with an idea that maybe we should start investing in people rather than their homes. Maybe we should start looking at relocating some people. Maybe we should start looking at using our funds a little differently, getting them in and providing them with case workers and whatnot. So it's a concept right now. But it does sound really good. Don't get me wrong, if a home needs fixing, we're gonna fix it. But if it doesn't make sense to fix that home, we're just gonna try to look at what we can do to maybe help that person in a different way. So that's something that the housing team is gonna be rolling out. They'll be working more with that one. Now we get into the old meat and potatoes. So if you see the big number there, inspections between all of our departments that touch code enforcement, and these numbers, you guys, everything is run from July 1 to July 1. So July 1 of 18 to July 1 of 19. 11,169 inspections. Altogether, I saw a slight little uptick on sidewalk snow. No surprise. We're still recovering from our winter, I think. But so everything else was pretty substandard all the way across the board. We're still seeing that part that makes me happy is that really good compliance rate. All right, so we have our total cases. You're going to see a lot of inspections there because a lot of times we have to go out to a property more than once, sometimes 3, sometimes 4 times. But the compliance after notice is the big one. We do see we still see that really high compliance rate, and that's something that I think through our teams working with people, not going all the way to immediately to the citation level, trying to work with them to get something solved I think it actually helps our compliance rate. So with that primary goal, this has been a goal. It's a good goal. We've had it for the last couple of years, is to maintain the balance between code compliance and code enforcement by implementing programs to ensure a minimum standard is met and keep the city of Sioux Falls safe and clean. Pretty straightforward. So that's kind of our goal as far as our overall code enforcement. So with that, any questions?
All right, thank you. Councilors? Councilor Staley.
Yes. Yep.
Oh, I was going to ask, that house on the left,
Yes.
have you been in there?
Yes.
Is there mold in there?
When I was in there, no.
Okay, because the question that's being raised is what is going on inside? Is it even livable? And apparently you're thinking it is.
It's down to the studs inside. There's nothing finished inside. What we have against that house right now from a property maintenance perspective is to finish the exterior of the home, right? Because then we want a plan. We want the exterior of the home to be finished. So we want all the stucco to be finished, all the roofing materials. We want the yard to be in place. Okay, so if he finishes that, we're okay from our standpoint. But at that point in time, we are going to probably suggest that we get some kind of a time frame from him when he's going to finish the rest of the inside. Our violations that we have right now are just due to the outside of the structure. And like I said, there's a permit. He was granted a permit, and then he did attend court. He went to a court hearing back in early June, and he was given an extension until August. My hope is that in August, he comes back to court and says, I've done all of this. I've done X, Y, Z, right? And that's what we want. We want this person to finish this house.
And it seems like the house on the right,
Yeah.
And I have people who've contacted me there's homes that are in really bad shape.
Yeah.
But it takes a long time for the city to come in and
Oh boy, it does. And we've done a lot of cleanups at this point in time. This was one of I probably talked about last year as far as our compliance monitoring. We did a lot of cleanups of this property. This particular individual is still in Sioux Falls, but he's not. He's getting, I think he's trying to get some mental health care. But he's in and around, and I think he would just prefer to be homeless. I think that's what he would probably do right now, so.
And this ties in with, you talked about the neighborhood grants on page 6.
Yep.
And when we were talking about this neighborhood summit that's coming up in October.
Yeah.
The possibility of expanding that program to neighborhood watches as well, watch groups, so that they could also benefit from
Yeah.
some of this funding.
Nope, that's a great
And the
idea.
difference between what an association is versus what a neighborhood, what a watch group is going to be. So I would just put that plug in, I would hope you would do that. And also, we were talking about that property tax rebate, and that's not the right terminology, but where that was apparently given to some businesses through the years, where they were able to have some of their property tax forgiven. It's not a TIF, but it was designated to certain areas in the business district, and apparently, like the Whittier neighborhood it was involved with that. But expanding that to these different residential pockets that may be experiencing more blight, to encourage them, like this person, to give them even more incentive to fixing something up. Versus, in addition to what we already have, which is that you can apply for some help replacing things in your home. Which is, what's that program called again?
We have our neighborhood revitalization program that we run through our housing.
Where you can get furnaces and then maybe Counselor Brecky's going to talk about that parking strip, hopefully. You're going to say, the parking strip thing is fabulous, and then also Counselor Brecky and I have been talking about maybe even putting something in there that talks about things that promotes bees and butterflies, that kind of planting. And then one more thing I wanted to ask you about. If you go to the page that had the hot zones.
Yeah, the heat map,
Yeah, let's go back to that, because one of those happened to be where I live.
Sure.
East of Avera, I was just wondering I didn't realize, you have east of Avera there? So that's on slide number 9.
Yep.
Can you go back to that?
Yes. Oh, sorry. Keep flipping back to it on my own. Sorry about that.
So what's the situation there?
Full disclosure, I will say this. I got this map the other day. I have not had a chance to sit down and meet with this team yet. They gave me all these maps. They're obviously looking at some kind of what we could do to, I'm going to assume on that, it's probably an area they have circled that we can put more focus on, more attention, from a public works standpoint and from the city standpoint, really. How about this? I'll learn more about that actual circle, and I'll let you know exactly what that means.
That's because I think there's some pretty nice residential homes in there.
Totally
I mean, they're not, I
totally
don't think we have a high-level police calls.
I'll get the skinny on the red circle, and I'll get it back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Councilor Kiley. Thank you. And thanks for the presentation, and thanks for the work that you do. We've had quite a bit of contact here recently on different issues in the Southeast District, and I appreciate your follow-up with that, as the neighbors do as well. I'm surprised at your comment that when you're at different conferences, people are surprised that we offer free dump passes and we have Project Nice and Keep. Have you tracked the number of code violations and complaints about neighboring properties in areas and compared before Project Nice and Keep was an area, and then compared the number of code violations and submissions after Project Nice and Keep?
We do a survey, and I'm going to tell Luann that she can chime in if she wants here. We do a survey after we do Nice and Keep. We pick our areas, and then we go back and we do a survey of the areas again the next year. Okay, so we're going back in those areas and doing those surveys. When the areas pick for Nice and Keep, we're also doing, when I'm saying surveys, if you didn't participate in the Nice and Keep, and you have this blatant, like a big mattress in your front lawn, all right, and that we're trying to get you to get rid of, and when we're giving you the opportunity to take place on Nice and Keep, after we're done with Nice and Keep, we go back and do a survey, and then we're notifying those homeowners. Okay, so we're really kind of hitting that area, and we're hitting the area kind of in that. And once your area is in Nice and Keep, then we get on a revolving, and you'll go back to that area after we've actually surveyed it and picked all the stuff up. So we don't really. I can say that we do see an increase, and we use our heat maps every year, just like that heat map right here. We use that to determine our areas for Nice and Keep, and we look at these areas for inspection. So we will see year after year where we were in an area on a heat map, and then the next year, we won't see a lot of complaints come from that area. And that's where you can see the success of the program, through those heat maps like that. So we tend to see those things kind of shift, but yes, we do go back and we do a survey. We're not only picking it up on the year that you're in the area, we're going back and then doing another survey the following year. So.
Well, I think it's a great program, and I think it's something that, yes, there's an initial investment, but it's an investment that pays big dividends down the road.
Yes.
And is well worth it.
I agree.
So thank you for your efforts.
Yep.
Counselor Brecky.
Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. This was something that's near and dear to me, code enforcement, and to see how far you've come is just kind of blowing me away. And to see how, to see how comprehensively the city is using code enforcement and how effective it has been. And if you could just bear with me to just, council members, if I could just tell a small story, and Diane, it won't be as long as the one I told you guys the other day, but when the city attorney started when the city started the city attorney's office, they had 3 contract attorneys. And the driving force between actually starting a full-time city attorney's office was code enforcement. They were leaving, and other issues. They were growing to the extent that they realized that, other things, that other things needed to happen. And they felt like there's, were stones that, were leaving unturned, and that there were going to be some liability issues. But when I was first hired as the first full-time city attorney, they still had the 3 part-time. And the first task that they gave me was code enforcement. They said, we need to start enforcing our codes. And people came over from the health department. And I'm in a suite of offices all by myself. There was the mag court had moved out, and that's where they were going to start the city attorney's office with, a telephone and an empty file cabinet and a desk and a phone. And in comes the health department. Luann, you weren't there yet. But they came in with boxes, and they dropped them on my desk, and I said, so this is code enforcement. They said, so what are you doing? I said, so what are you doing right now? And they said, well, if we get a complaint, we send them a letter and tell them, there's a complaint, you need to clean it up. And if they don't clean it up, we send them a second letter, and we kind of ratchet it up a little bit and say, okay, we sent you the first letter, you got X amount of time, you better clean it up. And I said, then what happens? Well, we send them a third letter, and that one's really mean. And we really tell them they better clean it up. And then what happens? And then we walk away. So that's where code enforcement started in the 90s. And then if you can just bear with me, it's a funny story, and I hope you all appreciate it. One of the things, because I was doing code enforcement for all of the departments, and that was under the commission form, and they didn't communicate well together under the commission form of government. So you had the directors, depending on, they just didn't have directors meetings or anything like that. But I was working closely with the police department, the fire department, and the health department, on various different issues, a lot of them involving enforcement of one form or another. And it's like a real life joke, but this actually really happened. I insisted that we all go to lunch at Minerva's, because I thought, what, these guys need to be talking to each other. We need to be talking. And so we went to lunch, and before we went to lunch, the health director called me and said, there's only like 3 places in town he'd go to lunch, because, when you're a health director, when you're inside all of those restaurants, there's only a few of them you really want to eat at. So he decided we were going to Minerva's, because they always got 95s. And so he had that decision made before we even went there. But I'm walking into Minerva's with them, and because I'd worked so closely with them, I observed this. The fire chief sat at the table in such a place where he was facing the exit. Okay, because firemen want to know how to get out fast if there's a fire. And the police chief sat with his back to the wall, because that's how police are trained. So when I look at this, and the reason I tell this story, the point is, you all come from your different perspectives. So you all have the different things that you focus on. But when you work together, it's amazing what you can accomplish. And the reason for telling it is, when you told me today, code enforcement team meets every 2 weeks, and you're more neighborhood focused, that tells me where really truly where we've come. Because we realize when we work together somewhere, and we really, when we started Project Nice and Keep, I mean, that's when we were realizing it. And I'll tell you, your heat maps used to be little red pins on,
sure they
little
did.
dots
Oh, yeah.
and pins on a map when we were identifying those. And when we actually started those programs. But, you know, that just made my heart glow, because I mean, it's natural that it should happen that way. And I think what we were beginning to realize, and now you've truly realized, is that when you all work together from those different philosophies and with a shared focus, the ability of code enforcement to, you know, to uplift a city is just unmeasured. I mean, it's just has a huge power, and I can see on so many levels that you get that and that you're bringing that forward, and I'm just so impressed. So just
I
wanted
appreciate
to tell you
that. It's,
And I hope you enjoyed the story.
Yeah.
It really was true, and
well, and I will say this, I mean, Diane's here from our housing team, Luann Ford's in the back from our health team. It's a team effort, totally a team effort. Right now, I will share to date, we have less than 20 cases that sit at the attorney's office. So that's something when you talk about boxes being dropped off, our attorney's office right now, they have less than 20 cases. And that's through a lot of working together through our teams, really pushing our teams to do what's right on the field and whatnot, but that's kind of where we're at today. So we're in a really good spot, but it's a team effort on all fronts, so.
And I'm guessing, Luann, you've seen that transition too, how that just, and I can see that it's just grown and blossomed. That's just, you know, very exciting.
I just get to be the lucky one to tell you all the good things that we're doing, so.
Cool, thanks.
All righty.
Anybody else? Quick question, if everybody else is done. So that house that they're finishing, is that the same owner that's been there since the beginning?
Yes.
It is.
It is.
That's interesting, because about 6 years ago, a realtor that had it listed was in my office. I actually did an open house there at one time, and I was under the impression shortly thereafter that they'd kind of skedaddled. But
Nope,
no,
they're still, it's
around?
the same original owner, so we're, like we said, we're just hoping that he can get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite a frame, and I don't know.
Yeah.
But second question, neighborhood associations. So there's 12 right now.
Well, there's 12 that are really active. Right now, I'm gonna say we probably have maybe 15, 17 that maybe they're just like a social organization, right? Maybe they just get together for a yearly party, something like that. But of the ones that we have 12 that are really active. From your All
Really
Saints.
active ones, is there like an average size? Like how many houses are in a?
They'll vary. Whittier is our biggest association. Actually, it's one of our, and Whittier has some challenge. I'm sure you guys have probably heard. They're re-energized right now. Okay, so they're an association that was kind of quiet for a while. They're our largest geographically association. I mean, it's a massive undertaking. So Diane has attended a couple of their meetings as of recently. We have some ideas for them. Hopefully we can help them any way possibly can. But yeah, so they can vary in size. Oakview Neighborhood is another good size neighborhood association. All Saints is one of our what some of these associations do are really neat. I mean, I went to a potluck. It was a hot dish. They called it hot dish competition, right? So they had a little hot dish competition in the fall. So they do all kinds of neat things. These different associations do, and they're all geared around the neighborhood, right? So then they get together. And they enjoy each other's company, but then they also talk about how we can make the neighborhood better. So, all in all, it's a good thing.
Oh, that's great. So it could be 15 houses in one, could be 75 in a.
Yes,
Yeah.
very much so. Yep.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we will move to public input portion of the meeting. Does anybody have any comments on anything covered in the meeting today? Welcome.
Sierra Broussard, Sioux Falls. So Matt Tobias and him do a wonderful job, okay? You know as well as I know that Whittier neighborhood needs attention. So as council members, when code enforcement comes up here, because I think we need more teeth in the law here, because some of these places in Whittier and Central need to be condemned and bulldozed down. As you've seen on my Facebook, when I encounter the police department and say, no, you're gonna clean up. We're gonna push these issues. You're gonna make arrests, and we're gonna clean up these high crime areas. It takes a lot of work to get the police on board to clean up these areas. So it's not just code enforcement. We have issues with this police department. We have issues with council members. I remember, if I'm not mistaken, Matt Tobias came here when the fabulous, the one that was in Central, Arkenbach was here. She was all about her district here. And Matt Tobias came here to put more code enforcement and more teeth into the law here, and code enforcement was shut down. So just because it's not happening in your neighborhood and you don't have a lot of code violations in your neighborhood doesn't mean nothing. Southeast District is facing because some rich people walk in, put a bag, and put the poop in the garbage can. That's their issue. Okay, I already know about that issue. We're talking about the hardcore issues in neighborhoods where we have graffiti, we have gang members. Don't believe Chief Barnes. I'm talking about gang members, not prison gangs, because I'm out there 5 days a week. When Matt Tobias comes here to get more teeth in this code violation, we need more teeth in the code violation. We need to pick this up more. First letter, second letter, third letter, people's gonna pay $100. People's gonna pay that $500 in court. People's gonna pay money. Some people are rich, they don't care, and they're gonna keep doing it and doing it and doing it. Whittier neighborhood is a very challenging neighborhood. It is. Hopefully that neighborhood association can come together. And I'm gonna say it because I'm tired of fighting in that Whittier neighborhood district with the police and everybody else, and we just had a drug bust there last week. If this neighborhood association does not want to be a neighborhood association, they need to fold. A neighborhood association is there to be your backbone for your neighborhood, not to go have coffee in a church and gossip and want to know what's going on just on French Avenue. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I want you to go in that neighborhood, in your neighborhood, but only certain ones are going to go, I already know it, and go and walk in that neighborhood and see how bad it's getting there in that neighborhood. It's not just code enforcement issues. It's the police department as a whole, health department, all got to come in and bombard them. It didn't take me long to get that drug house out of there, did it? When it came to public input, they knocked down the doors and beat on the doors, and the pit bulls came out. And we're going to continue to knock all of these houses down. But council needs to come on board in their districts to help out. I am tired of Central neighborhood, and I'm tired of the Whittier neighborhood. I'm not saying Pat Starr is not doing his job in the Whittier neighborhood, but these policemen needs to step up to the game. Now, Crime Watch. I know a lot of them in neighborhoods that are not even active. I'm in a Crime Watch neighborhood. My captain lives right next door. It's not active at all in there. We need those crime neighborhoods active. Again, pick them back up. A sign is not going to deter nothing. These people are coming out from Chicago. They don't care. Oakland, California, gangbanging. They don't care about no sign. If they're going to shoot, they're going to shoot regardless. So we need to pick up that neighborhood association, get these captains to be more proactive in their neighborhood. We have one in Central that is a retired police officer for sheriff department, and he's the captain. Don't want to get involved in his neighborhood whatsoever, and I go beating on his door every freaking week. Don't answer his door on the issues going on Prairie. So it is a good opportunity for code enforcement and everything that they have done. Absolutely wonderful. They have done a lot. But I think we need more code enforcement. And when Matsubais comes here and the city comes here for more code enforcement, I hope that they don't get shut down like when it was when Erkenbach and Rolfing was here, when he got shut down for it. I hope and I pray that they can work together with council and put more teeth in here to clean up these neighborhoods, because really what we need is the city to come here and bulldoze them down, because it's getting like Michigan in some of these neighborhoods. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, we will adjourn.